Hi, I'm Orion Mott, and I'm welcoming Katrina Bos today. And she is a Tantra expert, and we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things. So we'll get started with, this started on a conversation. I called her on the phone, and we had the most fascinating conversation I've had in a long time about interesting subjects, specifically spirituality and within the divine male and female. And I thought this would be fantastic to capture on video. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about your book first. You've written some books on the matter. Tell us a little bit about the Tantra books you wrote.
So Tantric Intimacy just came out last summer, and it was a real culmination of everything I teach. And it's not all about sex. You know, there's one section, section 4, it's about sex.
Everybody loves section 4.
Everyone loves. People either want to skip section 4 or they only want to go to section 4.
Okay.
Which is fine. You know, sometimes we're drawn to something because that's where we're wounded the most.
Sure.
And our sexuality, like later we'll talk about the masculine and feminine, but our sexuality is where we see how dysfunctional we are and how far off path we are. Like as humans, it's almost like we know that it's supposed to be way different than this. Like,
describe that. Tell me about way different. That's exciting.
Right?
Sure.
Well, so what the problem is we aren't taught anything about sex. So we come into this sexual time, our hormones are flowing, and society says, don't do it, use a condom, don't get disease, da-da-da, but they don't tell you nothing. So of course, that doesn't matter. Things are moving, so what do? We default to our primal instinct to procreate.
Sure.
Right? And we know somewhere inside that, okay, I'm going to take some part of my body and I'm going to insert it into some part of your body, and we're going to go like mad for a little while, and then something's going to happen and it's going to be over and we will have accomplished something. But of course that procreative model, it's great for babies. Like that is the greatest way to make babies. And it doesn't even matter whether you are gay or, it doesn't matter because the model is the same. You get together, we call it friction sex, you know, you rub parts together, it's exciting, you jump off the mountain and then you pass out. Like that's how it is, right?
Hopefully not.
Well, I'm sure there's lots that have experienced that. So, but the problem is we aren't taught anything, mostly because our parents didn't know any better. Like this information has been lost because sexuality's been demonized as being something evil and only for procreation, otherwise you're sinful and all this kind of thing, right?
Right.
So, but the truth is, as humans, we're able to do so much more than just make babies with that energy. Like we talk about in energy worlds, all about how this is life force energy and it's divine energy and all that kind of thing. And then our sexual energy comes out of our second chakra, or predominantly out of that kundalini. But it really is all that. Like it actually literally is, as each of us, we are meant to be masters of this energy in that we can actually choose to do with it what we want. You know, you do healing work. If we focus on it, we can actually take that energy and heal parts of our body.
Sure. And
it's the same sexually.
So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about how we use sexual energy to heal our body. I've experienced this myself, and I've worked with people on this. But I want to hear your take on this.
So there's a lot of different aspects to it. Like one, so for example, ejaculation. It's a huge topic, right? Ejaculation is only needed for procreation, right? And it's different than orgasm. Like orgasm is a function of the nervous system. Ejaculation simply causes sperm to come out. Like that's it. And the key is they often happen together because we're just in a procreative model.
Right.
But they don't have to. Like sometimes people ejaculate with an orgasm. Sometimes people orgasm without ejaculation for sure. So the key is if you imagine you're making love. So in my teaching, so if I teach a couple and I'll say, okay, go away for a weekend and make love, but don't ejaculate.
So it creates this energy desire that comes up. And you're focusing on the frequency of the connection, not based on sexual gratification.
Right? And it's different too. Like, so for one of the biggest challenges in relationship is oftentimes one of the partners will go, well then why are we having sex? Which is sort of the beginning of the reason they're taking the course.
Right.
Because there's a disconnect on why we're making love, why we're together, how do we function with each other. So in that initially, and then it becomes a question, well then what do we do then? Because we've actually lost touch with our entire beings. Like all of a sudden we get naked and all we are is a pair of genitals.
Right.
Well, we've now given up 99% of who we are.
The rest of us.
The rest of us.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you get rid of that. And even the goal of orgasm, because as soon as our brains are in the bedroom, we suddenly, okay, well, first I want her to come, and then I want this to happen, and then I want this, and I saw this thing and this porn thing I watched last night, and then there's this, and our brains are actually doing it. Well, the brain is so limited. So Tantra, in its essence, is about integrating the divine into the physical world. Well, the divine is infinite. It's in the singularity, it's in oneness, and it's truly infinite. This physical body is limited. You know, I am in this time and space, you are in that time and space, and I can only experience as much as this body can experience.
Sure.
The integration of infinity into this limited body is the magic of Tantra. So now all of a sudden, if you bring two infinite bodies together, the bodies just become the vehicles for whatever chemical amazing reaction that's going to happen between these two people. But you have to get out of your head, because the head keeps it very limited.
It separates things, sure.
It separates you as people, and it creates a box for what you're going to experience. But what's possible is infinite.
So you're saying it basically, to paraphrase you, is that the focus is on the vibe between you two. It's not the physical bodies. The physical bodies are the vehicle, but it's the vibe that's created through that union. You're saying, and building that energy up, in that spiritual energy up in that union is basically, it's focused on connection rather than physical touch. Physical.
All about the connection.
Right.
Because that's the point. It's sort of like...
That's the transcendence, right?
It's the transcendence, and the reason it is we talked earlier before we were filming about, so there's oneness and there's duality, right? And this oneness, we talk about, that God is omniscient and omnipresent and all that, which makes no sense to us, because, not really, like we can say the words, but it doesn't really make any sense. Because this oneness doesn't make any sense in this left-right duality, masculine and feminine world. So now imagine, if you look at us under an electron microscope, every cell of everything in this room is just energy. And the energy molecules aren't even touching. They're just close to each other by magnetism.
Right.
So now you take this oneness and you split it into two. And the two can play with each other. It's almost like experiencing ourselves with ourselves. You know what I mean? It's like, this is interesting. And if true union happens, you're back to bliss. You're back to oneness. So when two people come together, if you can truly connect and release all the limitations and truly connect, then you experience pure bliss. And that is that tantric thing, when you see the pictures of the people in union and there's energy flowing everywhere, and that doesn't come out of a trick. It doesn't come out of an exercise you did. It doesn't come out of a breathing technique. It's a genuine, and this is the hardest thing about Tantra, is that it's real. If you're actually upset, if you're actually guarded, if you're actually unable to release your mind into the moment because you're afraid to be vulnerable, which is really reasonable. The world hasn't prepared us to be very open and vulnerable in relationships yet. It's coming, but it's just not yet. So it's very hard for us to be completely heart open like that, to connect in that absolute genuine way with absolutely no intentions. I don't need to be anything, and become that drop in the ocean. Like that's why Tantra is a real journey. Like, it's a real spiritual journey. And you can start at the sex, because that's where we feel it the most in our life. But it's almost like you find out, that's possible? Okay. And you can kind of back your way out of it, and eventually you find the points that are hurting. You find the reasons you struggle to get close. And then once all that is healed, slowly you start having these experiences that make no sense. The most incredible tantric experiences sexually, people always ask, the number one question, what positions do we sit in? It's like,
they're all the positions. If you have that connection.
That's not the point.
Right.
Like, you could be holding hands.
Yeah.
You could be simply holding hands. It's the same thing as...
It's that vibe.
It's... So one of the things I teach a lot about is touch. Because we often localize our touch, through, being yanked around or being heavily handed or whatever, handled heavily. That's right. But the truth is, our nervous system is one. And we know this, right? If you have a new partner, or you like that person over there, and they go by and they touch you, and your whole body feels it instantly.
Everything's alive.
Everything's alive.
Right.
Well, imagine being intimate and everything staying alive.
Right.
Like, that's insane. You don't even have to touch genitals. You can just simply touch someone's
Right.
face, and that the human body, like, I mean, with this is like an electrical, magical experience, like this creation. So then all of a sudden, I, with all my intention, I'm like, you know, and I'm touching you, and if you're receptive to that, it's like, and it's just magic. Like, forget about the sex. The sex is a whole other thing, but just simply two humans. It's almost like understanding what an honor it is to get to be intimate with this person. What? Like, how amazing is that? Then to actually come to a place where you're actually connecting the bodies and inserting genitals, but even then, and this is where this whole getting away from ejaculation is so important, because when you actually, like in a heterosexual relationship, when the vajra, so we call like the penis the vajra, it's Sanskrit for thunderbolt, which I like because it redefines it as opposed to a ramming rod of kind of the procreative world.
Sure.
To actually, no, this is the giver of energy.
Right.
This is what the masculine energizes Mother Earth with.
Sure.
Like, this isn't, you know, and I am not just a cylinder to be pumped, you know. This is yoni, you know, it's actually just Sanskrit for vagina, but it's a whole being. So all of a sudden, when the vajra and yoni come together, it's like plugging into the universal socket.
Now, I've heard in Tantra, people don't move. They just stare at each other's eyes, and they stay silent, and they just focus on that connection. I think they call it riding the wave. But they focus on that connection, they keep start building. It's almost like a pot where they're both putting energy into it, and it builds this frequency up. Is that so? Is that accurate description?
Sometimes.
Okay.
The thing is with Tantra is it's infinite.
Sure.
So there's no rules. So a lot of times you'll do that certainly in exercises, in workshops, because it's a little safer than, you know, everyone getting naked and doing weird stuff, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. But, so we were talking about the masculine and feminine. So a lot of times if you're like eye gazing and you want to ride a wave together, you can do something through breathing techniques where I may inhale, their exhale, and then they inhale my exhale. And you can play with the polarities in the body where the feminine, this is my positive pole, so this is where I give. And then the masculine receives through the heart, and then they give through the vajra, and then I receive through the yoni.
So that's, it's like in Qigong, they talk at the heavenly circuits,
yes.
where they connect the heavenly circuits together. Interesting.
And so you circuit this together. And then, of course, the eye gazing is just obvious. Like, that's just such a deep connection, right? And so you have this, and then this presence, I don't know, but again, what I find is it only works when it's real. Like, it's not just a case of, okay, well, how about you and I just do this, and let's just try this. It's like, nah, it might be interesting. But when there's actual love, and actual connection, and actual respect or honor and all that, it's not just a word, it's actually really something. And you can do this in intimacy, you can do it just sitting, you can do all kinds of things. But the key with this interaction, so to me it goes into this masculine and feminine idea, is that the masculine and feminine is very misunderstood. Like, we often are like, well, oh, I'm a very masculine male, or I'm a very masculine woman. And it's like, in Tantra or in the more ancient ideas, it's not like that. You're only masculine when you're interacting with a feminine. So I am completely whole. I am completely masculine and feminine.
Sure.
I talk, which is masculine. I listen, which is feminine. I intuit, which is feminine. Then I manifest, which is masculine. I am strong enough to protect myself, which is masculine. To be vulnerable, which is feminine with myself. This is my balance. So with all by myself, I'm not masculine or feminine. I'm just one.
Right.
Like, I'm in perfect balance. Same with you. You're in perfect balance. You're just you.
Unless we're with a mate, and then once we're a mate, I think we talked about this before on the phone. Actually, it was a fantastic conversation, just like this one. As you mentioned that when we were by ourselves, we are complete, and when we're with a partner, then we take on a role. We take on a side of that.
Exactly.
So with my partner, I become manifesting the masculine energy, and she represents the feminine energy, and we have that polarity to how that flow that goes through. Because if you have two masculine energies, they're competing. If you have two feminine energies, they're competing in a different way, right? And there's not that sense of balance.
Totally. Well, and that's why, like with this breathing, for example, If you're both just breathing at each other, you stay separate. But for me to be vulnerable enough to receive their breath into me.
So one breathes out, the other one's breathing in? Wow, okay.
Right? And so
Gotta try that.
yeah. And there's a real receptivity to that. And this is the thing about the masculine and feminine. And it's not just in mates. This is like if you imagine all humans on the planet, we all come out of this oneness. And now we separate out for whatever reason, we don't want to go there, but we separate out. In order for us to actually interact, we must polarize, whether you're romantically involved or not. So I'm a parent, and my children are naturally the feminine, and I'm the masculine, because they need something. They're hungry. Well, the hungry requires to be fed. And then someone comes along and says, well, here's a sandwich. And this is an interaction. This is two people interacting. If the two of us are sitting here with a sandwich going, here, have a sandwich, we're not interacting. But when one is actually hungry, and I give them what they want, then we've now created something.
Right.
One of the stories I say in my book, for example, is, let's say, you're just sitting on a bus. So one dynamic is protector and vulnerable, right? This is a huge masculine-feminine dynamic. And you're sitting on the bus and you're just hanging out. And then all of a sudden there's a little old lady up there, and somebody goes to try to take her purse, and she can't defend herself. Well, my intention, my focus on her is now creating some kind of potential union between us, because I'm now focusing on her. I've come out of my separateness and gone, wait, what's going on here? And when I realize she can't defend herself, I will rise up in the masculine, and because she's in the feminine, the masculine always responds to the feminine. The feminine just is, and the masculine is always action.
Sure.
Relation, everything. So I now rise up, I go over, and I tell the dude to, bugger off, and then she's like, oh, thank you, and then she goes, sits, and I go sit, and then we revert back into our separateness. I'm not now defined as the protector or a masculine person. I simply rose up in that moment.
So you take on the role.
And that's it. But that's what created the union in that moment.